Okay, so this is the fourth video, I believe, in a series where I'm sort of breaking down some interviews of individuals who are involved with the Penguin show that's on HBO right now, both actors and some behind the scenes people like writers, directors, um, and really focusing on some of the cognitive functions and comparing and contrasting how they show up in different types. And I've been focusing mostly on the SI versus NI types. Um, Not really trying to narrow down exactly what type they are, but I certainly have my hunches. But more of just, you know, what to look for when you're trying to figure out is somebody more of an SI type or an NI type or a SE type or NE type. And so some of the ways that the different functions manifest themselves, especially given what the interviewer is asking them to do. Like, are they asking them to provide an SI response? And this interviewer asks a lot of SI type questions, like tell me how it felt, or tell me about this experience. And the Colin Farrell in the first video, and I encourage you to watch that video first. He has a hard time just coming up with SI responses to SI questions. He tends to sort of verge into NI philosophical, here's what it means type of responses, where you compare him to somebody like Matt Reeves in one of the other videos where he's asked an SI question and he gives you a 4 minute long SI response about just the story of the events and how they unfolded, and he said this and then he said that and he said this and then he said that and then this happened and that happened, and giving you a lot of details. This next person, Lauren, she's I think the main writer and showrunner for the Penguin, and she comes across as very SI, probably an ISTJ or an ESTJ, very polished, leaning towards ISTJ, and I'll explain why through the video. But notice her responses to SI questions. Now, she doesn't go into full blown, I'm going to tell you a 4 minute story because she's too polished, right? But she does give you enough details to answer the question as it was asked. It doesn't really verge into all the philosophical stuff that you saw with Colin Farrell. And gives you enough detail to show that she's got pretty high functioning SI in her stack. So I'll explain what I mean throughout the video here. So here we go.
Only one man big enough to run this city.
I love the way that this show opens because we get to see Gotham in the aftermath of the Batman movie. So, from your perspective, what did you want to get across to the viewer as far as where Gotham is now? Where is Gotham in this moment in time?
Well, we take place about a week after the events of the film, so we know Riddler has bombed different seawalls in Gotham and created this terrible flood. So we come in on a very broken city, and it was important to really showcase that even though Gotham has always been a bit broken in a lot of ways, this is the world we're inhabiting right now for 8 episodes. We're following Oz, who's on the street. He's in the muck and the grime. We're in the seedy underbelly of Gotham, and we just also get to see different sides of Gotham as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was a nice contrast because I've never seen suburbs of Gotham that kind of portrayed like that, and I think that was a nice counter or a foil to what Oz and where he is in Gotham. So it's a nice contrast for the viewer.
Yeah, it was really important to us, and we created maps and all these things with our production design team to establish where these different neighborhoods are and who's from where, how damaged certain areas are. Oz is from the east side of Gotham. He and Victor bond because they're both from the east side, and just trying to more understand where people are and the wealth and class disparity within Gotham as a result of that. The Falcones are across a bridge. It's not easy to access. No public transit goes over there. There's so many cities in the United States that feel like that. And so we just really wanted to also have Gotham be a character in that regard.
Yeah.
Okay, a few things here. So first of all, the first question he asks, well, where are we when this show starts? And she gives a pretty good answer, about what happened at the end of the Batman movie and where the city is right now, and gives some details and enough description. And then he starts asking about the process of creating that world. And again, she goes back and gives you details about how they were drawing maps and how it was important to put people in different places based off of their character and where they're from, et cetera, et cetera. And so not only is she showing you sort of her SI detailed response, she's providing details that matter, right? But she's also showing you her TE side, right? This was the process that we went through to establish the city. And, excuse me, we went through the process of drawing out maps and, thinking of different types of socioeconomic areas in the city and how that's going to show up in the characters. And she sort of gets a little FI dig in there as well about how the wealthy parts are shut off or sheltered from the rest of the city. Like there's no public transportation that goes out there. And she makes the point that, that's like a lot of American cities. So she gets a little FI dig in there, but she's really explaining the TE process. And then, is providing enough SI information in detail to answer the question, right? And she, isn't going off the rails and trying to philosophize or, give you some sort of, pithy observation other than her little dig about the public transportation. But like what we saw in Colin Farrell. Okay.
And then, with our central character, we're doing such a deep dive into Oz and his psychology. So what was the most important thing for you to get across to the audience as far as who this guy is?
Honestly, just, to spend those 8 hours and make them worthy of 8 hours, to have them all be relevant and to dig deeper into who he is psychologically, what drives him, what motivates him, what makes him tick. The fact that maybe you're charmed by him in one second and disgusted by him in the next, that he's a peculiar character, he's hard to pinpoint, and, he's often on his toes. And he's just coming up with things on the fly. He's impulsive, but he's also very calculated. But also most importantly to understand what drives him emotionally, and that's his mother and his love for his mother. All he wants is her approval, and that is why he wants power, that it's rooted in family and it's rooted in her affection. And I think that speaks volumes as to who Oz is as a character.
Right.
Okay, so again, she's providing pretty concrete, specific details about the character and what's important for developing this character. She's getting into some meaning stuff, some NI stuff, but isn't going off the rails to do it. She's sticking with her SI story and the particular details to make the point. And then also, again, some more TE, this was our process kind of information.
You got to know him so much through his mother, and like one of the things I loved about watching it was I couldn't tell if he was just being reactionary or if he was calculating in any given moment. So for you, just personally, what was like the thing that excited you most about the Penguin? Was it like a mannerism? Was it something, an action that he did that you're like, oh, that's good stuff?
I grew up reading comic books, and so I was familiar with the Penguin, and probably my Penguin was Danny DeVito's depiction in Tim Burton's Batman Returns, which is like an incredible movie. But it was so fantastical. It was so...
Okay, so this is an interesting thing to pay attention to. So he's asking her pretty much, how did you develop the Penguin character? And first she starts off talking, drawing on that SI information. I grew up reading the comic books, and I remember seeing, Danny DeVito's depiction in the Tim Burton movie. And that's sort of what I was used to. So very SI, type of information that she's relying on. But she's going to go on to talk about how they wanted to deviate, excuse me, from sort of the normal or, the past iterations of the Penguin and make him more of sort of a common man as opposed to this sort of operatic, fantastical sort of character like the Danny DeVito character. And it's interesting what she goes on to say, because you could tell that, she wanted to use her SI information to build this character, but she's got some INI, and let's assume she's an ISTJ for a moment here. And she's got INI at fourth function, where it's there, and she could think of different possibilities, but it being down in her fourth function, does she really trust it all that much? And you could tell that she sort of wrestled with using the information that she has based off of her own experience, reading the comic books, watching the movies, and then trying to come up with sort of a different role or a different avenue to take this character. And that's going to require some NE. And so you see this a lot in ISTJs, where if they're supposed to come up with sort of a new possibility or a new way of doing things, they could do it, but it's down in their inferior function. And so they want some reassurance, right? I always think of the fourth function as the function where you run and try to get help from somebody to help you do it, right? Because you don't really trust yourself completely to do it. And so you want some reassurance, like, I'm going to do this, and what do you think? And note how she talks about going to Matt Reeves, the showrunner, and sort of checking with him to make sure it's okay, right? So I'm going to use my NE, and I'm going to come up with this sort of new take on the character using my NE, exploration of the world. But I want to make sure that I'm not breaking the rules, right? I want to make sure that I have permission to do that, because, everything that I know about this character is based off of my SI. So let's watch the rest of her response with that in mind.
So heightened, which was it was awesome for that, but not relevant to our show. So to me, that was most exciting is the fact that we're grounded, that he's just a man, that I get to write a larger than life character like that, but who should feel real, that it should feel honest and raw and
some FI there, right? Some authenticity.
Vulnerable. And, it's exciting as a writer to get to dig into a very flawed person.
Yeah, and this is a character that literally billions of people on Earth have heard of. So as a Batman fan, and going back to the comics, the TV shows, the movies, how much thought goes into placing Easter eggs around the set? And
okay, again, the interviewer is, I don't know if he's doing this intentionally, but he's kind of nudging her, again, saying, hey, look, billions of people know about this Penguin character, and you guys are sort of creating this new take on it. How comfortable are you with it? And are you putting these Easter eggs that people are going to know about in the show? Let's just check out her response. It's interesting.
Because fans are kind of looking at every little detail and corner. Is that something in the front of your mind when you're making a show like this, or do they just end up being sort of happy accidents?
I'm definitely aware of it. Nothing in the show is a happy accident. Everything's I'm very detail oriented, and Matt is too. And I think this is where we bond, because he's very detailed in his filmmaking.
Okay, there's your TE. Very detail oriented. There's no happy accidents. Everything is intentional.
And for me as a showrunner in this show, I think the devil's in the details. So every little Easter egg is purposeful and thoughtful and intentional, but I didn't want to just lead with that. We're making the show to have you dig deeper into these characters and create new canon and hopefully engage with people and like empathize with them in surprising ways and connect with them and really want to watch these people so they hopefully can live on, beyond this version of a story too.
Notice she keeps saying hopefully, because again, she's creating something new, using that fourth function.
And creating new canon.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that Oz gets so humanized is some of the parallels with the lore that I knew growing up. For instance, the Jason Todd Robin story where Batman catches him vandalizing his car, then he's like, oh, maybe that's the new Robin. In the same way that Oz sees Victor, kind of doing the same thing. Is that a parallel that y'all were sort of drawing from?
I mean, I definitely, when I was thinking of the types of characters that Oz should interact with and the kind of story I wanted to tell and how you dig deeper into this guy, how you understand him, I did think about, Batman gets his Robin. How come Oz, the Penguin, doesn't ever have a character like that? Especially in a crime drama, I think the mentor-mentee relationship is extremely essential. And I did so much research, and it is so much about grooming people to be mobsters and gangsters.
Okay, so again, they introduced this new character, a sidekick for the Penguin. Penguin's never had a sidekick. We're deviating from her SI knowledge. Again, we're in NE territory here. So you kind of get the sense that she feels like she needs to explain that it's okay, right? We should all be comfortable because I did my research, and in crime dramas like The Penguin, there's always this mentor-mentee relationship. There's always some sort of sidekick that's being groomed into the criminal enterprise, right? And so even though the Penguin has never had a sidekick, well, we need that for this show, right? It's sort of an SI type of rule. And again, she mentions how she did research into this, and you could just tell that she's trying to get comfortable by introducing this new NE stuff into a very well-established SI knowledge bank on this character.
You want to ingratiate people in it who are capable of that level of violence. And I don't think Victor is inherently that type of character, which to me was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about grooming mobsters, you can go to Sophia as well. So she's a character in the comics. So how do you make the decisions as far as this is something that we're going to keep from the comics, and then we also need to add this to flesh this character out a little more?
Well, I asked Matt early on because he was still editing his movie, and so it wasn't as clear in terms of getting to fully see the film by the end. Asked him, like, how are you adapting things? Are you, like, honoring the comics? Are you literally adapting anything? And to him, he was like, I think you pay homage, but there's freedom here. And that's how he viewed it. It's like, tell the best story.
Okay, again, very ISTJ response or sort of events unfolding that I was alluding to before, where they know the rules. They know what this character was and always has been because she read the comic books, watched the movies, has that SI knowledge. And now they're sort of deviating from that. So she has to ask Matt Reeves, who's, sort of the boss here in some respects, is it okay? Is it okay if we do this? Or what are the ground rules here? Are we going to try to stick with what the comics have given us? Or do we have freedom to sort of explore? And you can tell that Matt Reeves' response was sort of hand waving and like, well, pay homage to it, but you don't have to stick with it. And so now she feels comfortable. Like, okay, I can use my NE to sort of deviate from my SI knowledge bank, but it's okay because I'm going to incorporate that new stuff into my SI and become comfortable with what I'm creating. And again, hopefully the audience out there will feel the same.
So to me, I didn't feel beholden to any comic. I'm aware, of course, that Sophia's a seminal character in the comics and she's depicted a certain way. And my depiction of Sophia is quite different than that. But I think I was granted, freedom, creative.
Again, she was granted freedom. So she feels comfortable. I'm not trying to make it sound like she's wishy-washy or a wet fish, but she wanted to make sure, right? She wanted to know, okay, what are the ground rules here? And once she got assurance that, she can let her NE run amok and come up with new stuff, then she felt comfortable, but she also feels like she was given permission to do it.
Creatively from Matt early on of it's okay, like do whatever you want. DC was so supportive of
Again, DC, Matt, they're supportive. They're telling you it's okay. Go ahead and do it.
that. And so for me as a fan and someone who grew up reading comics, I wanted to definitely honor them. I want there to be echoes and things that feel reminiscent of the character that came before. But Sophia and our depiction of her is wholeheartedly different in so many ways.
Yeah, I'm curious from your perspective, the first time you saw The Batman and you got to actually see it. Obviously, there's talks with Matt, and then we're doing this show, but you never really know what you're working with until you get to see the movie. So was there something that really surprised you about The Batman when you actually sat down to watch it for the first time? You're like, oh, that's interesting. Now that I know this, we can go here with the show.
I mean, it's a very emotional movie. I think Matt's a really emotional filmmaker, and I've always known that because I'm familiar with his work prior, but seeing this iteration, I didn't necessarily know if it could evolve beyond what was already done before. But of course it can, because one, it's Matt, and two, the Batman lives on and has lived on for so long for good reason. But it was really striking to me that Gotham felt inherently different. It felt very grounded and grittier than any other previous depiction. And so to me, it felt like because everybody's a person, they're just honest, and it feels just like our world, but slightly heightened, slightly darker in the right ways, but not too much that it feels like we're veering on comic book territory. It felt like we could tell a grounded crime drama, which is what we've done.
Okay, again, getting comfortable with deviating from the norm. She ultimately, I think, got there. But, you could tell she put a lot of thought into it. And how this is deviating from the traditional comic book, but it's grounded in the rules that govern crime dramas, right? So there's some sort of rules there that she can rely on, some sort of tried and true formula that her SI and TE can work together and create this story. And use just enough NE so that you're not going completely bonkers and completely out of the norm, but just enough to make it interesting, right?
So people love vacationing in cities, even though they could be scary parts of New York or LA. Are you visiting Gotham as a tourist, or is it just a place that right now in this world we're staying away from?
I mean, I've heard they've got really good theater in Gotham off Crime Alley, but I don't think I'll partake just yet.
Go to the matinee, not the late show.
I'll go to the matinee, not the late show. I think I'll be a bit safer.
Okay, the ISTJ with the FE joke. So go back and watch that again, because she, if she is ISTJ and FE polar, you can see she's not really engaging in an FE kind of way, but she's telling a joke and making it obvious that she's telling a joke. To me, that just comes across as very FE polar, very ISTJ, but still funny. Okay, so again, I probably beating this to death, but it was an interesting interview because it's almost like the interviewer knew that, hey, it's not really a sore spot for her, but obviously an area where she put a lot of thought into it. This idea of taking a well-established character and a well-established world, Gotham City, and putting her own twist on it and feeling like she had the permission to do it. And so not only was she getting permission from the boss and, the higher up executives, but she also felt like she was getting permission from the fact that they're making a crime drama. And there are certain elements, there are certain sort of traditional pieces of a crime drama that she's working into this well-established world and these well-established characters. and coming up with something new. And I think my read of it is that she feels pretty proud of it. And it really is a cool show. She did a great job. But you could just see how, it's not like Tim Burton or like Quentin Tarantino where they're just going to do what they want to do, right? They're just going to do something because they think it's cool, or it's their vision and nobody's going to tell them no. Instead, it's this very calculated TESI kind of way of coming up with a script, coming up with a story, something that works, something that people are going to enjoy, but also it's not going to rub people the wrong way. It's not going to be so out there that you're going to end up upsetting, a large portion of the fan base. And I do think if you watch the show, they really nail that sort of balanced point where you do feel like you're watching a Batman show or, something that takes place in the Batman world. But you also feel like you're watching this show like The Sopranos or something that could have been, could have taken place anywhere and had different characters. It just so happens to be that it's, these people from the Batman universe. So, real interesting take. I'd be interested in your thoughts on it, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye.